Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Really excited about this video and the series I'm about to do. I've been wanting to do it for a while, but it's taken me this long to curate all the video content I have. And I'm still not finished yet. This is going to be a multi-part series, but it has to do with cables, and it has to do with a cable manufacturer visit. I've told you this before if you're a long-time subscriber. I went to visit Inakustik's facility when I went to Munich in Germany. That's where they're located, but it was across the country. I think a 3 or 4 hour drive plus to go visit them. Spent the night, and I never would have thought I would have been number one visiting a cable manufacturer, just because I'd always prioritized cables a lot lower on the totem pole of importance for your system as a tweak and stuff. But also, I didn't think that a tour of a cable facility would take that long. Certainly thought that engineering firms that do electronics or speakers and stuff like that would be much more involved. But I was so wrong when it came to Inakustik. Now, other ones probably wouldn't even invite you to come visit them because they're done out of somebody's garage, or there's maybe 2 or 3 people working there, limited equipment, nothing to show you. But you're going to just watch what's going to happen in this video series in terms of wherever you are on the cable believer, denier debate. It really doesn't matter unless you have zero standards. If you don't care whatever goes into your system, you just want the cheapest, whatever, and nothing you do to it is ever going to make a difference, then yeah, you're not going to like this series because, you don't care, what goes into your cables. But on the flip side of the coin, even if you're more of a denier, or depending on where you are, even if you're the most subjective person, I think you're going to learn that just being subjective alone on sound quality alone metrics are not the only thing you want to consider. Certainly it's important to consider that with cables, but let's face it. When you're looking to buy a cable, at best, how many cables have you used in your own system with that same gear over many years? Often you may have used several cables, but the gear has changed as well. You don't have that much experience yourself to benchmark. So you have to listen to other people and what their impressions are, subjective impressions are of cables. And guess what? Almost nobody agrees. Go ahead and post on Facebook and any of those groups. Ask somebody for a suggestion on cables between your 2 pieces of gear. Pick whatever pieces of gear you want. There you have cables. You're going to get hundreds of different suggestions, and almost none will duplicate. So subjectively, you can't rely on your own experience because very few people have a lot. You can't rely on other people's experience. And then there's always the portion that you've got to allow for, whether it's confirmation bias, placebo effect, or the fact that the shortness of the run and the type of application between the 2 pieces of gear isn't going to make that much difference, depending on certainly 99% of the brands that you buy. So subjective sound quality, if you're in that boat, you're going to enjoy this because you're going to start probably by the end evaluating other characteristics of that cable and what brands you really want to invest in and feel good about being in your system. And then on the flip side, let's say you're a cable denier and you want to say, oh, it doesn't make a difference. Sound quality is going to be the same. Well, you may actually be surprised that a company like Inakustiks will agree with you in terms of there's no need to put, a $30,000 power cord that's pure silver. Now, this one's not the pure silver one, but in a system, hooking it up to a subwoofer that cost, $3,000. They're not ones to tell you that, at least Inakustik isn't. They understand that, and that's why they offer all budget ranges, different types of cable. But also, if you're on one of those objectivists, most objectivists do recognize that LCR, inductance, resistance, capacitance, can play a role in quality of performance of transmission of the signal. And that is what Inakustik believes in. And you're going to see experiments, you're going to see their lab, you're going to see their test equipment. All of that's going to be in one part of the video to satisfy you on that metric. But there's so many other metrics that we overlook. And it's kind of ironic. I don't want to make this analogy because it's not a one-to-one analogy. But right now in society, we're all talking about the sub that went down to the depths of the Titanic and imploded due to all kinds of, now we learn, issues with construction and cutting corners and doing things not properly. Obviously, we never heard of any of that stuff when they were doing this before the actual disaster happened. So we tend to not worry until the disaster happens, to worry about things like quality construction, engineering, reliability, safety. Those are things that, obviously not to the level of diving to the Titanic underwater. I'm not going to make that analogy, like I said, but it's still something you need to consider. This is a very high voltage transmission line, and you should not trust this to people that aren't getting certification standards, like unfortunately that sub didn't adhere to. These are things that you don't want to shortcut in any part of life. Okay, yes, the risk is going to be a lot less, but this is high voltage, and quality of construction, consistency, reliability, safety are all things you want to add to objective parameters as well as subjective parameters. We're going to have plenty of music clips too. And actually, once you see that video, you're going to be surprised at what made the biggest difference in the various cables and things we tested. But getting started with the cable construction itself, one thing you want to pay attention to is obviously the quality of the conductor. Where did they just buy it off the shelf from some third party in China and put it in a jacket and put some fancy ends on it? How do they construct it? That's what you're going to learn. None of those things apply to Inakustik, with their own metallurgy, their own designs. Nobody really copies Inakustik. There's one company that tried, and in fact, I showed them at this latest show. The amount of conductors that you could see through the jacketing will tell you right away it's not an Inakustik cable, because they put, when you see the thickness of this, here's another thing. Let me go ahead and get this out the way first. We as a hobby tend to buy with our eyes instead of our ears, and that's a problem. And especially when it comes to cable, I've seen so many people go up to cables that if it's not thick and it's not beefy and heavy, then they think it's not made right. Well, that's kind of the opposite way you got to look at it, because number one, especially with a power cable, the last thing you want this to be is heavy and pulling out of the IC. The fact that they have to come up with these support systems now tells you it's the cable. That's a problem. It should not be that heavy. It should not be pulling out. Yes, some of these conductors can get pretty beefy when you get the gauge, but you want to not have that as your metric of a good quality cable. It should be super flexible as well. I can't tell you, the worst power cable I ever seen in my life is that Pangea one. It was super cheap, but they call it a high. It was like unbendable almost, and you're paying for basically insulation in there. When you see a thickness of this big for Inakustik, guess what? The conductors are actually at the sheathing, because they keep spacers to keep the conductors spaced a certain way. When you do a cross section of some of these other companies with thick cables, you'll see the conductor diameters are so little. Sometimes only 2 conductors at most, maybe 3, 4, 6 at most, but still it's only a fraction of the diameter of the cable. They make it beefy so that you buy with your eyes. With Inakustik, it's a different story. You'll see when you watch the video how they construct these, and very unique and even secret of how they are able to thread these cables to be able to do it. And they do it with a very unique combination of human element, manual effort, as well as some of the best technology I never even knew existed for creating a cable, and helping them do it reliably. Again, reliability, consistency is really the key. Somebody making cables in their garage at night, after they've done, 10 a day, at the end of the day, they're probably tired of crimping, stripping wires and stuff like that. And that's when things can get nicked, things can get overlooked. What you'll see and should pay particular attention to with this tour is how Inakustik alleviates those risks. They have machines that do the stripping reliably, 100% every time, not nicking some of the conductors in terms of crimping to an exact amount of pressure, and not getting tired or fatigued like a human employee would over time. The human can use it, but we're getting standardization in some of those things. And the quality of connectors is what people most overlook. and that connection here. If you just take a phone charger, you've probably seen it yourself. You've probably plugged in a cable to your phone and a warning will come up on your phone that says slow charging. And you're like, why? This cable looks perfectly fine to me. Well, now you have your phone able to tell you, no, it's not. Something is in that connection not as good. You swap it with another charging cable, all of a sudden you got fast charging. Well, guess what? Our equipment doesn't give us that feedback when you have a poor connection to it. You just have to live with the results. It'll work like your phone will work and the charging work, but it's not working to its potential. So that's why with cabling, you need to pay particular attention to the construction, because you're flying blind. You're not going to get feedback other than sound quality metrics, which are sometimes hard to find, but the gear will probably still work. But optimal performance, you may not be hearing it unless you've got very good comfort in the construction quality, consistency, reliability, and that connector, the fact that they don't just take Furatech connectors like everybody else and slap it on OEM wire and use pre-bought sheathing. Even the sheathing that you see, you're going to see a machine that they wind their own, make it again unique, can't be really counterfeited. And even, I don't know if you can pick this up in the let me show you this end of it here. They have a laser engraver that's beautifully does on a curved surface. Again, paying attention to aesthetics. We haven't even talked about that. But let's face it, half the reason people buy these cables are aesthetics. They're cable jewelry. And yeah, I mean, can you get away with wearing a Swatch watch with a three-piece suit, you know, at a formal function? You can, you know, and probably a lot of people will give you props for that. But let's face it, this is called the high-end audio industry. You're putting very expensive gear, or you're ascending to a point where you want something that also is aesthetically pleasing. And this is one of the most beautiful cables in terms of aesthetics. The silver and black, the engraving, the flexibility, everything about it screams more Rolex and even finer type watches in terms of construction under the hood than Swatch watch or Timex. And so if that's a metric that you consider and want with your equipment and your high-end setup, you're going to see in spades how Inakustik provides that for you. Then on top of all of that, quality control. You cannot overlook quality control. Mistakes can happen even with all these machines and stuff. These kind of power cords at Inakustik, they'll take one in each batch. It'll go through 5,000 different bends of each way. It takes over 2 months to go through this machine that'll put it through the test. And again, like we talked with, the common thing right now is the Ocean Gate tragedy. We cannot overlook safety and reliability. That is just something you don't want. And if a company can't give you some of that comfort, if they can't tell you how it's constructed, how it's tested in quality control, I can tell you I've gotten $2,000 power cords in my room that weren't constructed that well. My friends have gotten some as well, weren't constructed that well. I've been to dealers' places. I've seen the quality control issues, defects, having to redo terminations with different brands. And I'm not here to call out different brands. I'm just here to tell you it's often the more expensive brands that take shortcuts in reliability, quality control, and just consistency of construction, such that you're not always getting what you're paying for. With Inakustik, you have stuff throughout the line, and you're getting what you pay for. When you get this in all silver, that is going to be a ton of silver in this, just metal cost, rare metal alone in this cable. And actually, we tested in one of the videos, you're going to hear testing a speaker cable with the pure silver. So I wanted to get this preview video out just because this is going to be such a long series of different videos. I'll have to break it up into chapters in some videos, but you're going to hear music clips for the subjective side. You're going to see the lab where we do the inductance, capacitance, resistance type testing that they do. You're going to see the jackets being made, the aesthetics from the engraving. You're going to see the connectors. You're going to see the manual as well as the technology used inside to assemble it. You're going to see the quality control machine that they use to test the bending. You're going to see also the other things that Inakustik does, like make recordings. They who else in the cable realm does their own recordings so that they actually know what they sound like and then can benchmark it to the true live event pre-recording. Not anybody that I know, no other cable company I know. And then their warehouse over, I don't even want to get into the millions of dollars of prepaid paid inventory that's in there, as well as gear that they help distribute, like Prime Air, which is phenomenal budget gear, as well as for higher budgets as well. There's just so much to take in with this video series. I needed to give you this overview. And I think by the end, whether you're a cable denier, cable believer, there's still going to be value that you take. And you may start reevaluating what you're using in your system on some other metrics than you thought matter now more than you thought did in the past. So hopefully at least that'll provide some value to you. So stay tuned. I'm going to get started with part 1. I'll upload that later, either tomorrow or today.